So for today's video, Chris and I thought that we would do something a little bit different. Instead of playing through the Worlds decks that we've been playing through for the past couple of weeks, more like a couple of months more like, we thought that we would spice things up a little bit and introduce a top 10 list. So like I said, today's list, I'll be talking about my top 10 favorite Pokemon decks of all time. Now, for a deck to make it onto my top 10 list, I have to have actually played it more than once in my life. So if there's a deck that does not appear in this list that you think is very deserving to be on my list, please put it down in the comment section below. I'll give it a try, and then maybe in the future, I might alter my list a little bit. So without further ado, number 10, Magma Spirit. Magma Spirit has recently become one of my more favorite retro decks to play in the Pokemon trading card game. Winning the 2004 World Championships was pretty huge, considering that its ability said that Team Magma's Groudon could not attack if you had 3 or fewer Team Magma Pokemon in play. But there was a lot of help for Team Magma's Groudon. You had Team Magma's Zangoose, you had Team Magma's Claydol, Team Magma's Camerupt. Not to mention, you had Maxie, and you also had Team Magma Conspirator to help with the deck too. So it was pretty cool since you had a deck that featured tons of Team Magma cards. And you also had the Team Magma Energy, which is basically double energy attached to your Team Magma Pokemon, which it was Dark type and Fighting type, which was also what Team Magma's Groudon was, a dual type. So you can hit for 2 different weaknesses. Team Magma's Claydol also had dual type, hitting for Psychic and for Dark types. So you could take out some of those pesky Gardevoir decks. Not to mention you had Team Magma Zangoose, who had the Call for Family attack to get you 2 basic Pokemon into play. And back then you could attack going first, so it was crucial to start with Team Magma Zangoose to help get you set up for future turns. I think I really like this deck is because how the Team Magma cards seem to flow together. You had your main attacker, the Team Magma Groudon, doing all the heavy work, but you also had Camerupt to get energy out of the discard pile and attach it to itself. Basic energy, of course. It did take a damage counter on it when you did that, but that was fine, because you could just remove the energy with Team Magma's Claydol. Team Magma's Claydol allowed you to move basic energy from one of your Team Magma Pokemon to another. So, if you had basic energy in the discard pile, you just attach it to Camerupt, then you can move it to whoever you want using Claydol's Pokebody. Number 9, Rayquaza. Rayquaza is one of my favorite decks to play from the 2013 Worlds format. Rayquaza had the attack for a fire and an electric to do 60 times the amount of energy discarded, but you had to choose either fire or electric. Now there's 2 ways that you can get a lot of energy onto Rayquaza, because obviously you need a lot of energy, because for each energy discard, it's 60 damage. So, do you go the Emboar route, which was a stage 2, but you can attach as many energy as you like during your turn, or do you go with the stage 1 electric, which you get the electric energy back with the electric energy in the discard pile. And one of the best decks just happened to play the electric route. So you would always have 2 or 3 electrics on your bench, and then you just keep attaching those electric energies as long as they're in the discard pile, because obviously you're going to discard the electric energy because you're using Rayquaza's Dragon Burst attack. Electric's Dynamotor ability was so good that they actually reprinted the ability a few more times than some other cards you might have heard of. There was Malamar, there's Bronzong, and heck, there's even a new Flaffy card coming out soon, which is the same ability for electric types. Now, of course, you had Malamar for psychic types, and you had Bronzong for metal types. But this goes to show that Electric's Dynamotor ability was so good, they brought it back to the Pokemon trading card game a couple more times, for different types of Pokemon, of course. But yes, this deck was one of the more fun decks out of that format. And whenever I get the chance to play this deck, I have to, because it's just so much fun to accelerate energy so quick. Number 8, Rain Dance. Speaking of energy acceleration, we're going to go way back to the beginning of the Pokemon trading card game, with Rain Dance Blastoise. Blastoise was the very first Pokemon that could accelerate energy in this fashion. Now, of course, Blastoise was a stage 2, not a stage 1 like Electric, so it was a little bit harder to get out. Blastoise's Rain Dance ability says you can attach as many water energy to your Pokemon as you like. Of course, back then, Blastoise, you could argue, was a little bit easier to get out, because there were no supporter cards back in those formats. Every card you could essentially play 4 of on your turn. This included Professor Oak, which was discard your hand, draw 7, Bill, to just draw 2, or Pokemon Breeder, which essentially serves as a rare candy. Of course, you had to wait for Squirtle to be on the field for a full turn before you used Pokemon Breeder. Of course, there are other attackers in this deck besides Blastoise. You also had Lapras and Articuno. It's important to note that back in these times, doing, let's say, 30 damage for 3 energy wasn't terrible. I mean, the best attack in the format back then was Hitmonchan's first attack that did 20 for a single energy. And that was impressive back in the day. Of course, Blastoise did have to worry about those energy removal cards, because it could be a little bit annoying if your opponent, let's say, played Haymaker, and they just kept discarding all of your energy with energy removal and super energy removal. But just about every deck played those back in the day, so I guess it all evens out in the long run. Anyhow, Blastoise's ability was so good they actually reprinted it a couple more times. It was on an Emboar in the Black and White series, as I mentioned before in the Rayquaza deck, and then Blastoise came back again, but this time with the Deluge ability, which pretty much said the same thing as the Rain Dance ability did back in base sets, where you can attach as many water energy to your Pokemon as you liked. But Blastoise is one of my favorite decks to play from base set, because you just seem to have a lot more fun. There's a lot of different things you can do, and you have to try to get Blastoise on your bench as soon as possible. That itself can be either a chore or a happy little task, considering what your playstyle is. So that's why Rain Dance is my 8th favorite Pokemon trading card game deck of all time. Number 7. Reshiplosion. Typhlosion Prime and Reshiram made a very good pair. Speaking of energy acceleration, we have to talk about Typhlosion Prime's Afterburner Pokepower. It's said that you can attach a fire energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon in play. If you do, put a damage counter on it. This, of course, paired greatly with Reshiram. The Outrage attack said that for 2 colorless energy, it does 20 plus the amount of damage on Reshiram. So, of course, you put the energy from the discard pile using Typhlosion's Afterburner onto Reshiram. You build damage on the Reshiram, and also you increase its damage output with Outrage. Now, other players could play Ninetales with this deck too. And Ninetales had a Pokebody that said if you discard a fire energy from your hand, you draw 3 cards. You use Ninetales' ability, you can put the energy in the discard pile, and then attach it to one of your Pokemon in play using Typhlosion Prime's Pokebody. So, with these combination of cards, you can kind of see why Typhlosion Prime with Reshiram did pretty good in that time. It's starting to seem like I like a lot of decks with energy acceleration. I can't help myself. I like it when abilities tell me that I can break the rules. I'm a rule breaker, I guess. Anyhow, this is my number 7 favorite deck of all time. Number 6. Garbo Garbodor. If you asked any player back in the Black and White era to name their least favorite card, odds are Garbodor would be probably on the top of their list. Garbodor had the ability that said if there was a tool card attached to Garbodor, that all abilities in play except for Garbotoxin basically were turned off. So Garbodor could be paired up with many different kinds of cards. You had a Landorus EX, for a fighting energy did 30 to the active, 30 to the bench. There was a Seismitoad that for a double colorless energy could item lock your opponent, and so on and so forth. Garbodor's ability to be paired with many different kinds of decks kind of made it the reason why a lot of players hated it. Because your opponent's deck could run smoothly and hit for a lot of damage and turn off all of your abilities. And you're just sitting there wondering, where did I go wrong? What happened? Why do I not like myself? Why am I playing this tournament? Why am I losing to a Garbo Toxin Garbodor? And then there's me playing Garbo Toxin Garbodor, laughing. Because sometimes I just need to take out my frustrations and anger at the world. That got a little dark there. Anyhow, Garbo Toxin Garbodor is weirdly one of my favorite cards from the Black and White era. It was actually reprinted in the, I wouldn't say reprinted, Garbotoxin did come back in the X and Y era. Back on another Garbodor called Garbotoxin, but of course the Garbodor had a different attack. So it's not really a reprint, it's the ability came back in a Garbodor. And of course I was thrilled when this card came back, because now, hey, I can play one of my favorite cards again. And then I can laugh at my opponent and go, haha, you cannot play your abilities. Because I am just, like that. Anyhow, for the sheer value that Garbotoxin Garbodor could be paired with many different decks, including Landorus EX, Seismitoad EX, Yveltal EX, the list goes on and on and on. All I can say is, if you're not prepared for Garbotoxin Garbodor, if you don't have a couple of those tool scrappers, you're in for a heap of trouble, my friend. So beware. Beware of the Garbotoxin Garbodor. At number 6. Number 5. Megazone. Megazone consisted of Magnezone Prime and Yanmega Prime. Magnezone had this really neat ability where you can draw up until you had 6 cards in your hands. And then the attack called Lost Burn. And that basically stated that for each energy that you discarded from your side of the field in play, you do 50 more damage. But instead of discarding it, it had to go to the Lost Zone. So you did have to be very careful with the energy that you got rid of in this fashion. But it does mean you can one-shot any Pokemon of your choosing. But I mean, you needed at least 3 to 4 in play to really one-shot anything. And then the Yanmega Prime also had this very neat ability. If you and your opponent had the same amount of cards in your hands, well then the attack costs are nothing. You can attack for free, basically. Which is actually pretty neat. So, with the combination of Magnezone Prime's magnetic draw ability, you can try to get the cards in your hand to hopefully either decrease your hand size down to your opponent's hand size, or increase your hand size. So that way you can use Yanmega Prime's ability to attack for nothing. But of course, I'm pretty sure we'd all like to hit our opponent's active for a one-hit knockout using the Lost Burn attack on Magnezone. It might be a little bit clunky, but Megazone is one of my favorite decks. Just because you can keep drawing cards off Magnezone and then attack for free with Yanmega Prime. I mean, who doesn't like to draw a lot of cards and attack for no energy? That's actually pretty awesome. But like I said, if you're going to be using Magnezone Prime to attack, you better keep track of how much energy you have left. Otherwise, you could be in a world of hurt if you have no energy. But wait, we have Yanmega Prime. We can attack for no energy at all. We just gotta keep our hand size the same as our opponents. Which can be done, because you had Judge. Judge stated that both players had to shuffle their hand into their deck and draw 4 cards. So there you go. There's one problem solved. Play Judge, and you and your opponent have the same hand size. Attack with Yanmega, and we can do some damage. So it might be tough to get Megazone up and running fully, but trust me, once you get this deck up and running, it's worth it. And that's why Megazone is my 5th favorite Pokemon deck of all time. Number 4, Megamonetric Regice. Megamonetric might not have seen a lot of competitive play, but this is my list. I like Megamonetric. You can't tell me what to do. Megamonetric had the attack for 110 damage, and then you search your discard pile for 2 energy, basic energy, and you attach them to one of your bench Pokemon. And I like to attach it to Regice, because Regice had the attack where it can do 70 damage, but then your opponent's EXs could not damage this Pokemon. And of course, this was in a time where Pokemon EX were running everywhere. Just about every deck played a Pokemon EX. Okay. Some decks like Vespiquen might have played maybe one Shaman, but still counts, right? They can't attack me with Shaman, right? Doesn't it? But I digress. The way to get the energy in the discard pile was you could use Battle Compressor. Battle Compressor said that you can look through your deck, pick up to 3 cards, and put them in your discard pile. So you can play the Battle Compressor, get like 2 or 3 energy in the discard pile if you wanted, and then attach them with megamonetric to your Regice. Now, of course, Megas were a little bit weird, because if you evolved a Monetric EX to a megamonetric EX, your turn automatically ended, which is not good. But they did come out with these tool cards that specifically stated, if you attach this to a Pokemon EX and then Mega Evolve, your turn does not end. But, of course, that's your tool card, so you can't really attach things like Muscle Band and things like that to do extra damage. But still, for 2 energy, you're doing 110 damage and some energy acceleration. Hey, we're talking about energy acceleration, right? So of course this has got to be one of my top 10 favorite decks of all time. My favorite memory with this specific deck is I took it to a tournament. I believe it was I think it was called a Cities back then. A Cities tournament. And my first 4 rounds I faced Evital decks. And Evital EX was weak to electric types, so I kind of went through all of them. And then I was the #1 seed going into top 8, and we're not going to talk about that right now. We are talking about one of my favorite decks, Megamonetric Regice. It energy accelerates to your Regice, and then you say, hey EXs, you cannot attack my Regice. So joke's on you. But you did have to watch out for a card like Lysander that brought up your bench Pokemon to the active. So there was a way around it. There's also escape rope. There's plenty of ways to go around it. And even though it wasn't the most competitive deck ever, it's still one of my favorite decks. Energy acceleration, and you deny them to attack with your X's. That sounds like fun in my book. So that was my 4th favorite Pokemon deck. Number 3. Zoroark GX, Lycanroc GX. I can safely say that Zoroark GX Lycanroc GX was one of my more competitive decks that I've ever played. Zoroark GX had the trade ability, which stated that you can discard 1 card from your hand in order to draw 2 cards. So if you have 4 Zoroark in play, it was actually pretty easy to draw a lot of cards and find the card that you're looking for a certain situation that you're in. Of course, Zoroark GX also had a great attack, called Radius Beating. For a double colorless, you can do 20 damage for each of your Pokemon in play. So if you have the full 6 Pokemon, 1 active, 5 bench, you're doing 120 damage. Put in Choice Band and things like that, you could be doing 150 damage. Now, of course, this was basically 2-shotting almost every Pokemon in the format. There might have been 1 or 2 exceptions. I'm not exactly sure what they are, but I believe there was 1 or 2 exceptions to that idea. Also, Zoroark played Lycanroc GX, which had the Bloodthirsty Eyes ability, which basically served as a Lysander supporter card back in the day, which you can drag up one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and make it their active. Now, Lycanroc GX also had a GX attack, where it can do a whole bunch of damage, depending on how many Pokemon your opponent has benched. So you can use the Lycanroc to use the GX attack and hopefully get a 1-hit KO on that Pokemon that's causing you trouble. With these 2 in tandem, I saw a lot of games come down to either the Bloodthirsty Eyes, or I use the GX attack, or I trade to get the 1 or 2 cards I need to win that game. It does happen. With Zoroark GX, you can go through your deck very quickly, and then Lycanroc to help with the rest. Another interesting thing about most Zoroark decks is that they played cards like Acerola. Acerola stated that if the Pokemon is damaged, you can just pick up that card and all cards attached to it and put it into your hand. This kind of made healing Zoroark pretty darn good, because you would have a Zaru on the bench, you would evolve into that Zoroark, and then you'd have the double colors in your hand, so you can just attack with Zoroark right again. So it kind of made Zoroark a little bit annoying, because you can play cards like Acerola to kind of essentially wipe away your opponent's attacks. A neat thing about Zoroark GX is that you could pair it with a whole bunch of different cards. You could pair it with Golisopod, you could pair it with Garbodor, and so on and so forth, to make all kinds of different kinds of decks. But of course, my favorite variant on the Zoroark deck was with Lycanroc. Number 2. Trevgor is my second favorite Pokemon deck of all time. Trevgor is a little bit different from your other Pokemon decks because Trevgor is not your typical standard deck. Because Trevgor revolved around Excelgor. Excelgor had an attack for double colorless energy. It did 50 to the active. It paralyzed it, it poisoned it, and then it shuffled itself and all cards attached to it back into the deck. You didn't really see attacks like this very too often. Now, of course, with shuffling Trevenant back into the deck, well, obviously, you need something to take its place. That's where Trevenant came in. Trevenant had this very, let's just put it, neat ability, which said that if it's in the active, your opponent could not play any item cards on their turn. So you kind of see in the combo with this, right? You use Excelgor to paralyze and poison the active. It retreats back into the deck, and then you put up Trevenant so they can't play item cards. Which means there's no way that they can recall that poisoned or paralyzed Pokemon. They can't play Switch. They can't play Escape Rope. The only way that they can kind of get around it is you would play Lysander, bring up something else on your bench, and then with Trevenant back on your bench, the ability is gone, and they can finally play items again. So that was one of the little knocks on Trevgor. Also, Trevgor played Mew EX. Mew EX had this very neat ability, where, I think it was called Versatile, where it could copy any attacks in play, you just need the correct amount of energy. Of course, Mew is easier to set up than Excelgor, so all you had to do was have an Excelgor on the bench, bring Mew active with the double colorless energy, and it can use Excelgor's attack. So it could shuffle itself, the double colorless, muscle band, whatever you have on the Mew, shuffle it back into the deck. And like I said, Mew is easier to set up, because it's a basic EX. Where with Excelgor, you had to wait until it was a stage 1. So that's kind of how the deck worked. You got to have 1 or 2 Excelgor on the bench, because your opponent's going to try and knock one of them out, and it's good to have a backup. Have 1 or 2 Trevenants on the bench, and then have room for a Mew. So the deck worked like this. Have Excelgor active, it uses the attack, bring up the Trevenant, you can't play items, or your opponent can't play items, and then you try to get Mew or Excelgor or whatever back. That's just how the deck worked. It was a nasty deck. We did a video on Trevgor a couple of weeks ago, where the games I played did not look very good, which is honestly one of the first times I have not done well with Trevgor. I did take Trevgor to a regional tournament, and I believe I placed in the top, at least it was top 100 for sure. I believe it was like 84th. And I think after that tournament, I became a huge fan of Trevgor. Just because it's just so much fun to try to get all the pieces you need, but also stalling out your opponent so they can't play what they want to do. You item lock your opponent, you paralyze and poison your opponent's active, and then you just got to keep repeating the cycle over and over again. I don't know why, but just the thought that Trevgor worked brings a little bit of joy to my heart. Before I get to my number 1 favorite deck of all time, I'm just going to list a couple of decks and give them an honorable mention. Pikarom, Behem from Unified Minds, and The Truth. You're not going to find a lot of newer cards in my list because, like I said earlier, there's not really a lot of time to talk about some of these new standard decks, like Urshifu V and so on and so forth. And my number 1 favorite Pokemon trading card game deck of all time is Darkrai EX Sableye. One of the big reasons why Darkrai EX Sableye is my favorite deck of all time, it was my very first competitive deck. I remember that in my very first city championships, I played Darkrai EX Sableye. I didn't do too well, but I made a couple of alterations to the deck, and the next day I went to a city tournament, and I ended up taking second place. So from then on, I became a huge Darkrai EX fan, which is very weird because before I built my Darkrai EX deck, I was dead set against Darkrai EX in every way, shape, or form. I think I like the idea of kind of building my own deck and not copying somebody else's list. But eventually, I caved in, I shelled out the cash, and I have never looked back. Darkrai EX did 90 damage to the active Pokemon and did 30 to a benched Pokemon. So, considering that pretty much every EX was about 180 or less, you could two-shot almost everything in the format. And then the 30 damage you could use to chip away the bench, any bench Pokemon. Unless your opponent ran Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime had the ability that prevented damage done to their benched Pokemon. But that didn't matter, because you were two-shotting pretty much every Pokemon in play, and you had really great item cards. You had Dark Patch, which attached a dark energy from the discard pile to one of your benched dark Pokemon. There was also Dark Claw. You can attach Dark Claw to a dark Pokemon, and your dark Pokemon's attacks do 20 more damage. This was before you had cards like Muscle Band and Choice Band, so Darkness kind of had the ability where it could do more damage, and it could accelerate energy with item cards. And then you also had Sableye. Sableye was very interesting because it had the Junk Hunt attack. For a Darkness energy, you could search your discard pile for any 2 item cards and put them into your hand. This was extremely good because if you ran out of Dark Patches or Crushing Hammers, Enhanced Hammers, Hypnotoxic Lasers, so on and so forth, you can just use Sableye's Junk Hunt and then get them back. Which, if you think about it, it's really good. Because then you could play Crushing Hammer more than 4 times. You could play Hypnotoxic Laser more than 4 times. You could play more than 4 Dark Patch. I mean, it was just insane how good Darkrai EX was. Darkrai EX was so good, in fact, it actually won the World Championships 2 years in a row. Which, that's pretty darn good. And also, Darkrai kind of follows suit where you had some energy acceleration, so yeah, I like it. I've been talking about energy acceleration for most of this list. Then, of course, my #1 favorite deck is going to be talking about a little bit of energy acceleration. Another great thing about Darkrai EX was Darkrai had an amazing ability. For any Pokemon that had any darkness energy attached to them, it could retreat for free. This was insane because you had cards like Keldeo EX that had the Rush In ability, which means that it could rush into the active spot whenever it wanted to. Well, once per turn, but you know what I'm saying. So you could just basically attach a Darkness Energy to Keldeo, and if your basic Pokemon, your Darkrai, was in trouble, or you just needed to put 1 energy onto it, no problem. Rush in, Dark Patch, that Darkness Energy onto that Darkrai, because maybe it was gone with Crushing Hammer, who knows, and then retreat, because you have the Darkness Energy on Keldeo. Bring Darkrai back to the active, and there you go. You're all set and ready to go. Darkrai EX, the deck that got me into competitive play and made me love the Pokemon trading card game. Thank you, Darkrai, for all your love and all your service. And that is why Darkrai is my favorite deck of all time. Which decks did I talk about did you not know about? Which deck are you willing to try? What decks did I not talk about are you demanding be placed on this list? Just please let me know in the comment section down below. But remember, this is my personal opinion. I don't mean any harm by not mentioning your favorite deck. It just means that either it did not make the cut, or maybe I've never played it before. Well, whatever you comment down below, I'll definitely take a look at your deck. And then maybe next time we can revisit my list, and there might be some changes. Who knows? Will Darkrai stay on top? We'll find out maybe in a future video. Thank you very much for watching. Please let us know if you like top 10 videos, if you don't like top 10 videos. But either way, we thought we'd give something new a try. And you know, I hope this turns out to be a very, very good success. Thank you very much for joining us, and I'll see you next time on Retro Pokemon TCG. Ugh. This was fun. This is more of a headache. This took an hour and a half. This was more of a headache. I need a script next time. Where's my agent? I demand my agent!